The glass-walled boardroom on the 47th floor of Langston Tower felt like a sealed aquarium. Light from the city pressed in from every side, cold and clean, turning the room into a cathedral of control. A polished table stretched through the center, so glossy it doubled every face, every cufflink, every twitch of a jaw. 12 executives sat around it in tailored silence, their laptops angled like shields. In the corner, an investor livestream camera blinked steadily, a tiny red eye that never looked away. At the head of the table, Victoria Sloan arranged her papers with slow precision, as if each page needed to know its place. Her fingertips flattened the edges. The faint scrape of cardstock against lacquer sounded louder than it should have. She did not rush. She did not need to. The room already moved around her gravity. Across from her sat Ava Monroe, CEO of Monroe Capital. Her posture was straight, calm without being rigid. The cuff of her suit rested cleanly at her wrist. A thin folder lay in front of her, closed, as if she had nothing to prove. She watched the room without scanning it, noticing without performing. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and expensive cleaning solution, the kind used to erase fingerprints from glass. Someone cleared his throat, and the sound died immediately, absorbed by carpet and money. A screen at the far end displayed the merger deck, bright numbers floating over a sterile background. 2.4 billion, the kind of number that made people careful with their words, careful with their hands. Victoria looked up at last, her expression composed in a way that suggested she did not have emotions so much as decisions. "Shall we begin?" she said, not as a question, but as a cue. A couple of heads nodded. A few pens clicked open. The livestream camera continued to blink, unblinking, patient. Ava rose when it was time to formalize introductions. Her chair moved back with a soft glide, barely a sound. She stepped forward, around the edge of the table, and extended her hand across the glossy surface. Her hand was steady, not theatrical, not pleading, simply offered clean as a signature. For a half-second, the room held its breath. It was the smallest pause, the kind that only exists before something breaks. Victoria leaned back in her chair. The movement was casual, almost lazy, as if Ava had offered her a napkin, not a handshake. A smile pulled at Victoria's mouth, but it did not soften her eyes. She lifted her palm instead of her hand, holding it up like a stop sign. Her voice cut through the chrome and glass with practiced clarity. "We don't shake hands with people like you." The words fell into the room and did not bounce. They landed and stayed. Silence spread, thick and immediate. A man 2 seats down shifted, his watch catching the light. Another executive's lips twitched as if he had been told a joke he was not sure he was allowed to laugh at. Someone let out a small breath through his nose, then stopped, as if he realized too late it had been heard. Then, unevenly, a few uneasy laughs broke the air. Not loud, not confident. The kind of laughter people use to align themselves with power before they understand what it costs. The investor livestream camera captured everything: the outstretched hand, the raised palm, the smirk, the laughs that tried to turn cruelty into something lighter. The red recording indicator blinked like a heartbeat. Ava did not snatch her hand back. She did not clench her fingers. She held the position for 1 beat longer than comfort demanded, long enough for the insult to become unmistakable, long enough for the camera to drink it in. The reflection of her hand in the table looked like a duplicate, reaching for someone who did not exist. Then she lowered her hand slowly, controlled, deliberate. She returned to her seat and slid her chair in with the same quiet glide, as if nothing in the room had been allowed to touch her. Her face remained composed, but her eyes did not soften. She looked at Victoria with a calmness that did not ask for permission. "Understood," Ava said softly. Victoria's smile widened, satisfied in the way a person is satisfied when a door closes exactly as she intended. She adjusted her papers again, the sound of it sharp as a blade drawn from a sheath. "Now that we're clear on protocol," Victoria said, and her tone carried the faint amusement of someone who believed she had just taught a lesson. "Let's proceed." A few executives straightened, relief passing over their faces like a shadow leaving. Someone nodded too quickly. Someone else tapped his pen against the table, a nervous rhythm pretending to be thought. On the screen, the first slide advanced. Numbers lined up in neat columns, forecasts, synergies, projections, the language of inevitability. Ava opened her folder. The paper inside was crisp, the edges clean. She took out a pen and began to write. The pen made a small, precise scratch against the page, steady and quiet. In the reflection on the table, her hand moved without hurry. The livestream camera kept blinking in the corner, recording the room's silence the way it recorded sound, recording the moment a single sentence turned a boardroom into evidence. Victoria began to speak again, guiding the meeting forward as if she had not just drawn blood in public. The city outside the glass continued to glitter, indifferent. Inside, the air felt cooler, the lights harsher, the tables shine brighter, as though the room wanted nothing to hide. Ava listened. She did not look away. She did not smile. Her pen continued to move, line by line, as calm as a metronome. In the stillness between slides, the memory of a raised palm hung in the air, and the red eye of the camera kept watching, patient as the law. The screen at the far end of the room shifted to a new slide, and the brightness sharpened every edge in the glass. 2.4 billion sat on the display like a promise carved in light. A thin hum rose from the mounted speakers, the kind of electrical whisper that made silence feel manufactured. Ava's pen moved with quiet purpose. Ink darkened the page in straight, disciplined strokes. She wrote as if the room were a lab and every reaction needed to be logged. A cufflink flashed when one of the executives adjusted his sleeve. Another dragged a fingertip across his trackpad, a soft rasp swallowed by carpet. Victoria's voice threaded through it all, smooth and confident. She talked in polished terms that tasted like metal, synergy, alignment, integration. Each word landed like a stamp, meant to leave an impression. Ava listened without lifting her chin. Her gaze stayed level, but it never drifted. The table's mirror showed small truths the room tried to hide. A jaw tightening at the mention of risk, a smile arriving too late, a glance exchanged when Victoria paused for effect. The livestream camera in the corner blinked steadily, its tiny red eye reflecting in the glass like a second sun. Then the meeting's rhythm found its cruelty. When Ava's analyst leaned forward to clarify a projection, Victoria cut him off mid-sentence with a raised finger, the motion crisp and final. "We're not here for guesses," she said, and the word guesses landed with a soft sting. A couple of men chuckled, careful laughs that stayed inside their throats. Ava's analyst sat back, cheeks warming, hands folding tighter than before. Ava did not touch his arm. She did not glance at him. She simply wrote one more line in her notebook and continued watching Victoria's mouth, the way her smile arrived on certain words like punctuation. A slide advanced, a valuation model, a forecast curve that arched upward with confidence. Victoria leaned toward the screen as if she owned the light itself. "Aspirational," she said, letting the syllables stretch. "That's a generous way to describe it." Her eyes flicked to Ava, quick and sharp, checking for damage. Ava's expression did not shift. She clicked her pen once, a small sound that cut clean through the room, then set it down beside her folder. The click was not a reaction. It was a marker. In the air, the scent of coffee had cooled into something bitter. The table still held the room's reflections, but now it felt less like a mirror and more like a ledger. Ava turned a page. The paper whispered. She wrote a single number and underlined it once, slow enough to look casual. Victoria continued, sharpening her tone the way a person sharpens a knife while still smiling. She corrected a detail on Ava's deck without checking her own. She questioned a line item as if it were a personal flaw. She spoke about discipline and standards and what the market rewards, each sentence delivered with that practiced corporate civility that made harm look like mentorship. The men around the table followed her cues. A smirk here, a cough that hid a laugh there, a nod that came too quickly, as if they were afraid of being seen hesitating on camera. Ava saw all of it. She registered the way one executive avoided the camera whenever he laughed. She noticed who looked down when Victoria's tone turned especially sharp, who pretended to take notes while listening for permission to enjoy it. She watched the CFO's fingers tap a nervous pattern against his phone, the screen face down like a secret. The livestream camera kept blinking, capturing the room's choreography. The red indicator did not care who was in charge. It recorded what happened, not what people later claimed happened. Ava's stillness began to feel heavier than the insults. Not passive, not fragile, something sealed. The meeting rolled on. numbers piling up like bricks. The glass walls held the skyline close, and far below, traffic moved like a slow pulse. Up here, time felt different. Minutes were measured in slides, in approvals, in the space between a question and the decision to answer it. Victoria's gaze landed on Ava again, and this time it stayed. "You'll learn, Miss Monroe," she said, her voice gentler on the surface, sharper underneath, "that this industry doesn't reward emotional ambition." The word emotional hung in the air like perfume meant to disguise smoke. Ava lifted her eyes. The room's reflections shifted on the table, faces doubling, features blurring slightly in the sheen. For a heartbeat, she held Victoria's stare, calm as a locked door. Then she nodded once. The nod was small, almost polite. It gave Victoria nothing to grab. Ava reached for her glass of water. The rim was cold against her fingertips. She took a measured sip. The sound of it was soft, ordinary, and somehow it made the room feel more exposed. She set the glass down without a clink. On the page in front of her, the underlined number sat alone, dark ink against white paper. The line beneath it looked like a cut. No one around the table seemed to notice that Ava had stopped taking notes the way people take notes to remember. She was taking notes the way someone prepares a record. The camera kept blinking in the corner. The red eye reflected in the glass, in the table, in the polished surface of Victoria's watch. Ava's hand moved again, writing one final word beside the underlined number. Her letters were neat, her pressure steady. Clause. She closed her folder with a soft, controlled press of her palm. The sound was small, but it landed with the quiet finality of a door clicking shut. Victoria moved through the deck as if she were conducting an orchestra that only she could hear. Each slide arrived on her cue, each chart summoned with a flick of her fingers on the remote. The screen's glow washed her face in pale light, flattening her expression into something almost sculpted. The room followed that glow, heads turning in unison, attention disciplined by habit and fear. Ava sat with her folder closed, hands resting lightly on the table. The glass surface held the faint outline of her fingers, steady and unhurried. Her water glass stood beside her, untouched now, catching reflections of the city like trapped stars. "Let's talk about structure," Victoria said, and the word structure carried the comfort of hierarchy. She pointed at a column of numbers. "This is where your team gets optimistic." A soft ripple of amusement moved around the table. Not laughter, not quite. More like agreement disguised as breath. Ava's mouth did not tighten. She did not correct Victoria. She simply angled her gaze toward the screen, the way someone looks at a locked safe before choosing the combination. One of Ava's analysts tried again, voice careful. "If you look at the last 2 quarters..." Victoria raised a hand without looking at him. "No," she said, simple as a period. The analyst stopped mid-word. The silence that followed felt rehearsed, as if the room had practiced it. Victoria glanced down at her notes, then back up, her smile returning like a mask snapped into place. "I'm protecting everyone here from wishful math," she said, as if she were offering a gift. "Investors don't fund feelings." A few men nodded. One leaned back, pleased with the line. Another checked the livestream monitor, then looked away quickly, as if eye contact with the camera might cost him later. Ava watched those reactions like a card counter watches hands. Who enjoyed it? Who tolerated it? Who pretended not to? Victoria's remote clicked. The next slide appeared. A timeline, clean and confident, marked with milestones and signatures that assumed cooperation as a fact. She leaned forward, elbows near the table edge, voice lowering as if she were sharing something intimate. "You built your firm from the ground up," she said, and for a moment, the compliment almost sounded real. Then the tone sharpened. "That's admirable. But admiration doesn't equal authority." The word authority sat between them like a weapon left on the table. Ava's eyes remained on Victoria. Her expression stayed smooth, but there was a quiet attention in her face that made the room feel slightly smaller. The hum of the mounted speakers seemed louder. Somewhere in the ceiling, air moved through vents with a soft, steady rush, like breath held too long. Victoria stood straighter, sensing the room's hunger for her dominance. She spoke faster now, stacking phrases, letting them build into momentum. "This industry rewards discipline, precision, Composure. Her gaze landed on Ava again. It doesn't reward emotional ambition. The phrase was polished enough to pass as wisdom. It was also sharp enough to cut. A man near the middle of the table let out a short laugh and stopped when he realized no one else joined him. He covered it with a cough. His hand went to his tie, tightening it as if the fabric could hide him from what the camera had already seen. Ava did not respond with anger. She did not defend herself. Instead, she adjusted her pen beside her folder, aligning it with the table edge until it sat perfectly straight. The movement was small, deliberate, and it drew the eye because it looked like control. Victoria noticed. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned wider. "We can proceed," Victoria said, and her voice lifted, bright, confident. "Assuming your team can keep up." The remote clicked again. More numbers, more charts, more projections. Victoria's comments became more pointed, less patient. She corrected tiny details that did not matter, just to establish that she could. She asked questions that were not questions at all, then answered them herself, turning the meeting into a performance where Ava was expected to stand still and absorb the script. Ava's team sat rigid, hands clasped, eyes fixed forward. Their screens stayed open, but their fingers barely moved. The only consistent motion came from Ava's gaze, the way it traveled, from Victoria's face to the men who laughed, to the live stream camera's blinking light, then back to Victoria again. At one point, Victoria paused and let the silence stretch, savoring it. She looked around the room, as if inviting agreement from each executive individually. "We all want what's best for the company," she said, "and what's best is clarity." Her eyes returned to Ava. "So I'll be clear." She stepped closer to the table. The heels of her shoes made a sharp, confident sound against the floor. Tap, tap, tap. Each step felt like punctuation. "You're here because you want access," Victoria continued. "You want legitimacy. You want to sit at this table and be taken seriously." A few executives smiled, enjoying the cruelty because it arrived wrapped in professionalism. Ava's fingers did not curl. Her shoulders did not rise. She remained still, the calm in her posture beginning to read differently now, less like endurance, more like patience. Victoria tilted her head, studying Ava as if she were an exhibit. "So here's my advice," she said, and the room leaned in slightly, drawn by the promise of a final blow. "Learn the culture. Learn the rules. Learn when to speak." She paused, then added, almost lightly, "and when to stay quiet." The air felt colder after that, as if the room itself had accepted the command. Ava let the silence sit for one beat. Then she placed her palm flat on her closed folder, not opening it, just resting there. The gesture was calm, but it read like ownership, like a hand on a lever. Her eyes flicked once toward the corner camera. The red light blinked back. She looked to Victoria again, and her mouth formed a small, controlled smile, barely there but unmistakable. Not defiance, not submission. Recognition. Victoria misread it immediately. Her smile widened in triumph, convinced she had broken something. Ava's pen moved again, just enough to write a single notation on the margin of a page she did not even need to open fully. A quick, neat mark, like a signature practiced 1,000 times. 8.3. She capped the pen with a soft click and set it down. The meeting rolled forward, but the energy had shifted under the surface. The room still belonged to Victoria in the way rooms belong to people who talk the most. Yet the camera kept blinking, patient and impartial, and Ava's stillness had begun to feel like a countdown no one else could hear. Ava's chair remained perfectly aligned with the table edge. Her hands stayed calm, and the closed folder under her palm looked less like paperwork now and more like a trigger waiting for the right second. Victoria called for a short recess with the casual authority of someone who believed time belonged to her. Chairs shifted back in soft unison. The table's reflections fractured as bodies rose, turning sleek composure into a scatter of movement. A few executives stretched their shoulders, rolling tension out of tailored jackets. Someone muted a laptop speaker. The live stream camera remained on, its red indicator blinking steadily, catching the blur of people stepping away from the table as if nothing important could happen when the slide deck paused. Ava stood without haste. Her chair slid back in a controlled line, no scrape, no stumble. The air felt colder outside the tight circle of bodies. And as she moved toward the glass door, the city's glow changed angle on her face, sharpening her features for a moment in the reflection. The hallway outside the boardroom was quiet, in a way that felt expensive. Plush carpet swallowed footsteps. The walls were pale and clean, interrupted by framed abstract art that looked like it had never been truly seen. A faint scent of citrus cleanser hung in the air, meant to suggest purity and control. Somewhere beyond the wall, an elevator chimed softly, distant and indifferent. Ava walked a few paces and stopped near a window cut into the corridor, a pane that looked down at the city like a surveillance screen. She did not lean on the glass. She did not pace. She simply stood, shoulders relaxed, as if waiting for a train that would arrive exactly when expected. Her phone vibrated once against her palm, a short, contained buzz. The sound was small, but in the quiet it landed like a signal. The screen lit up, bright white against her skin. She did not scroll. She did not search for a contact. Her thumb tapped a number as if it had been memorized for years. The line connected on the second ring. Ava's voice stayed low, measured, nearly flat. There was no anger in it, no tremor. The hallway air was cool against her throat when she spoke. "Execute Clause 8.3, she said. A brief pause. The soft hush of a response on the other end, too quiet to make out. Ava's gaze remained steady on the city below, where headlights moved like slow veins of light. "Effective immediately," she added. She did not explain. She did not justify. Her tone carried the clean finality of a stamped document. One more breath, then her thumb ended the call. The screen went dark. The reflection of her face returned faintly in the glass, calm and unreadable. For a moment, only the building's quiet machinery existed, the distant hum behind the walls, the subtle rush of air through vents. Ava's fingers tightened once around the phone, not from panic but from precision, then relaxed again. A door opened somewhere behind her. Laughter drifted into the hallway in a low, private stream, the kind of laughter people use when they think the room is theirs. Someone said Victoria's name in a tone that sounded like approval. Another voice replied, muffled, "Easy." Ava didn't turn toward them. She didn't need to. She held the phone at her side, the device now weightless, its purpose already complete. She began walking back. The corridor's lights reflected in the glass like a row of small moons. As she moved, the sound of her steps was almost nothing, absorbed by carpet, as if the building itself was trained to hide evidence of movement. The boardroom door waited ahead, the seam of it thin and bright. Ava paused with her hand on the handle. The cool metal pressed into her fingertips. Through the glass, she could see outlines of executives returning to their seats, shoulders settling, faces smoothing back into professional masks. Victoria stood near the head of the table, speaking to someone with a smile that looked effortless. She held the remote loosely, like a scepter. Ava opened the door. A wash of conditioned air slid over her skin. The room smelled of coffee again, freshened, as if someone had tried to reset the atmosphere during the break. The table's mirror caught her entrance and doubled it, Ava stepping in. Ava reflected beneath her, both calm, both precise. Victoria glanced up, just briefly, eyes flicking to Ava's face and then away, as if Ava were a detail not worth lingering on. The smile on Victoria's mouth remained intact. "Where were we?" Victoria asked, voice light, almost bored, as if the last hour had been nothing but routine. Ava took her seat. The chair aligned with the table edge perfectly. Her folder sat in front of her, closed. Her pen lay beside it, parallel to the seam of the leather blotter. She met Victoria's gaze without lifting her chin. "At the part," Ava said quietly, "where arrogance becomes expensive." The room stilled. Not fully silent, but the air tightened. A couple of executives froze mid-movement, hands hovering over keyboards. Someone's phone, face down on the table, gave a tiny pulse of vibration, like a warning clearing its throat. Victoria's brows drew together. The smile on her mouth hesitated, confused by the calm certainty in Ava's tone. "Excuse me?" Victoria said. Ava didn't answer right away. She let the pause sit for a beat, not long enough to be theatrical, just long enough to feel intentional. Her eyes shifted toward the corner where the livestream camera blinked, steady and patient, still watching. Then her gaze returned to Victoria. The remote in Victoria's hand clicked once, a nervous reflex, but the slide did not advance. For the first time in the meeting, Victoria looked less like a judge and more like someone who had misplaced a key. Ava's hands rested on the table, open, relaxed. Outside the windows, the city kept shining. Inside, something unseen had already started moving through systems and accounts and agreements, quiet as ink, drying, irreversible as a signature. Victoria held her expression in place as if it were pinned there, but the muscles around her eyes tightened. The remote stayed in her hand, its plastic edge catching the overhead light. For a second, she looked as though she might laugh off what Ava had said, turn it into a misunderstanding, a quirk of tone. Then she decided the room would follow her if she moved fast enough. She cleared her throat and clicked the remote again. The next slide snapped onto the screen with a bright shift, numbers rearranging into a new shape. Victoria's voice returned to its practiced cadence, smooth and sharp at the same time. "We're here to finalize," she said, "not to trade comments." Ava did not argue. She didn't smile. Her gaze remained steady, the calmness in her face making Victoria's authority feel suddenly louder than necessary. A faint vibration ran through the table, small, localized. One phone, face down near the CFO, buzzed once and went still. The sound was soft, almost polite, and it could have been ignored. Victoria ignored it. She continued speaking, walking through projections with clipped certainty. Her words were clean and pointed. She corrected a detail before anyone else could, as if correction itself were a form of ownership. A few executives nodded in rhythm, eager to rejoin the safety of her control. Then another phone buzzed. This one came from the far end of the table, a higher-pitched vibration that lingered a second longer. The executive beside it glanced down with the smallest flick of his eyes, then forced his attention back to the screen as if looking would make it real. Victoria's voice sharpened. "As you can see," a third buzz cut through her sentence. Two phones now, nearly overlapping. The sound thickened, turning from isolated vibration into something more collective, like insects trapped under glass. The room's stillness began to fracture in tiny, visible ways. Fingers paused above keyboards. A pen stopped mid-tap. An executive's foot crossed at the ankle, uncrossed without thought. Victoria's gaze darted across the table, quick and reprimanding. "Can we have phones silenced?" she said, her tone still smiling but brittle underneath. The CFO flipped his phone over, intending to dismiss the alert without reading it. The screen lit his face from below with a harsh, bluish glow. His pupils shifted as text stacked across the display in red banners. His thumb hovered, then stopped. He blinked once. Then again, slower. Another phone buzzed, then another, and another. The table began to hum with it, a spreading vibration that made even the water glasses tremble slightly against the lacquered surface. Victoria kept talking for a moment longer, forcing forward momentum. "We have commitments. We have timelines. We have—" The CFO's breath changed. It caught, shallow, the kind of inhale that signals the body before the mind is ready. He looked up at Victoria with a face that had lost its color. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again as if the words had weight. "Chairwoman," he said. Victoria stopped mid-sentence. The room stopped with her. "What?" she asked, the words short, irritated. The CFO swallowed. His fingers tightened around the phone until his knuckles lifted white against his skin. He stared at the screen again, then turned it slightly as if he needed someone else to confirm what he was seeing. "Our primary funding," he said, and the phrase came out thin like paper tearing. "It's gone." For half a heartbeat, Victoria looked at him as if he'd spoken a foreign language. "Gone," she repeated, too calm, too controlled. The CFO's thumb scrolled, fast and desperate. An email chain filled the screen, subject lines stacked one after another, all marked urgent. His lips moved as he read silently, the way people pray without meaning to. Then he said it out loud. "Monroe Capital has withdrawn all investment," he said. His voice cracked on the name. $2.4 billion, effective immediately. The words landed like a dropped glass. The room erupted, not in shouting yet, but in a rush of overlapping sound chairs, shifting, sharp inhales, frantic tapping on screens. One executive stood halfway, then sat again as if his legs couldn't decide what to do. Another reached for his phone and nearly knocked over a pen cup. The clatter was small but violent against the boardroom's controlled quiet. Victoria's face changed in stages. First disbelief, eyes widening, then heat rising under her skin, a flush that crept up her neck. Then something drained out of her, leaving her features pale and tight. "That's impossible," she said, the words loud enough to carry, loud enough for the live stream microphone to drink them in. On the wall screen, the stock ticker in the corner updated. Numbers shifted. A line dipped, then dipped again. Red swallowed the green. An executive's voice rose, frantic. "Check the markets," someone else barked. "Call legal. Now." Another hand reached for the conference phone. The speaker button clicked, and the empty dial tone filled the room with a flat, indifferent sound. Victoria turned toward Ava as if the force of her glare could reverse an email. Her chair scraped back this time, the first truly ugly noise she had made all day. She planted her hands on the table edge, leaning forward, eyes hard and wide. "You can't," she said, and the certainty in her tone sounded suddenly childish. "You can't do that." Ava looked at her without blinking. The reflection of Victoria's hands on the table made it look like she was gripping two ledges, one real and one imagined. "I can," Ava said softly. Her voice didn't rise over the chaos. It didn't need to. The calmness in it made the room's panic feel louder, more embarrassing. She spoke as if she were stating a simple fact from a document already signed. The live stream camera continued blinking in the corner, steady as a metronome. Somewhere behind it, thousands of unseen eyes watched the boardroom's composure peel away in real time. Victoria's mouth tightened. She looked around the table, searching for an ally, for someone to declare this a mistake, a glitch, a misunderstanding that could be fixed with authority. But the executives were already drowning in their screens. Their faces glowed blue, then red. The sound of notifications kept coming, relentless, like a storm knocking on glass. Ava remained still in her chair, hands relaxed on the table. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't check for confirmation. She watched the room as if she had already seen this moment play out in writing. Victoria stared at her, breath shallow, control slipping in the small spaces between heartbeats. The ticker line on the wall fell again, and the room finally understood that the humiliation wasn't over. It had only changed direction. The air in the boardroom stopped behaving like air. It turned dense, crowded with the sounds of panic trying to stay professional. Phones kept vibrating in short, angry bursts, rattling against the lacquered table. Notification chimes overlapped until the room had a new heartbeat, fast and irregular. The wall screen refreshed again. The ticker corner bled red. A clean line dropped, hesitated, then fell harder, as if gravity had finally been allowed to touch it. Numbers updated in quick snaps. Percentages shifted. The smallest downward arrow on the display suddenly looked like a blade. One executive's hand shook as he tried to unlock his phone. His thumb missed the screen twice. Another leaned close to the CFO, reading over his shoulder, lips parting in disbelief. A third stood and began pacing behind his chair, steps muted by carpet but sharp in their urgency. "Get PR on the line," someone said, voice too loud. "Where is legal?" another snapped, already dialing. A conference phone lit up on the table. The speaker button glowed green. A call connected and then dropped, leaving a hollow beep that sounded like a flat line. Victoria remained braced against the table edge, but her posture had changed. She was no longer presenting. She was holding on. Her jaw tightened so hard the muscle jumped near her cheekbone. She stared at the CFO's screen as if the words might rearrange themselves under pressure. The CFO scrolled again, faster this time, as though speed could undo the message. His eyes widened at the chain below the subject line. His voice came out quieter now, more afraid. "It's not just an email," he said, and the way he said it made the room lean in despite itself. "It's already executed." He turned the phone slightly so Victoria could see. The glow lit her face from below, harsh and unflattering. Lines deepened under her eyes. The red banners looked like warning labels pasted onto her authority. Victoria's lips parted. No words came at first, only breath. Ava sat across from her, still as a sealed envelope. The table reflected her calm like a second version that never shook. She watched the room with a focus that wasn't satisfaction. It was verification, the way someone watches a lock click into place. An executive at the far end of the table tried to laugh, a thin, disbelieving sound. It died immediately. He swallowed and rubbed his forehead, leaving a smear of light across his skin where the overhead glare caught sweat that hadn't been there 10 minutes ago. The wall screen dipped again. The candlestick chart on one of the side monitors, pulled up in haste, turned into a cascade of red bars stacked downward like falling dominoes. Each refresh hit with a soft, cruel blink. Red, redder, redder still. A young analyst, seated behind one of the executives, whispered, "It's dropping live," as if saying it quieter could make it less real. Victoria snapped her head toward Ava. The movement was sharp, the first crack in her carefully measured control. Her eyes were wide now, not with confidence, but with the kind of shock that arrives when someone discovers the rules have never belonged to them. "You did this," Victoria said, and the accusation sounded less like power and more like a plea. Ava's gaze held steady. She didn't nod. She didn't deny. Her voice stayed low, almost gentle, and that gentleness made it sharper. "I protected my capital," she said. Behind them, the live stream camera's red light kept pulsing. The room's chaos was being poured into the internet in real time. Every frantic swipe, every flinching glance, every executive who suddenly cared about optics far too late. One of the men at the table finally looked toward the camera, truly looked, and his face changed when he remembered the audience beyond the glass. He straightened as if posture could erase what the world had already seen. His hand went to his tie again, tugging it tighter, as though choking himself might stop the bleeding. The CFO's phone buzzed again, longer this time. He flinched as if it were a physical touch. He tapped the alert and his eyes moved across new text. His throat worked. "Banks are calling," he said. "They're asking about guarantees." Another executive blurted, "This is going to hit the credit line." Someone else, voice rising, said, "We need a statement. We need to stop the clip." Victoria's eyes darted toward the live stream monitor. For the first time, she seemed to see it as a weapon pointed at her. Her mouth tightened. Her hand twitched, as if she wanted to reach for the camera and crush it like an insect. "Turn it off," she said, the command sharp, instinctive. No one moved, not because they couldn't, but because the room was suddenly full of people who understood that a recording is more powerful than a chair title. Turning it off now wouldn't erase the beginning. It would only confirm the panic. Ava's eyes flicked briefly toward the camera and then back to Victoria. The movement was small, controlled, and it carried weight without speech. The CFO swallowed again, voice cracking when he tried to stay formal. "Chairwoman, the withdrawal is complete. The funds are already pulled." Victoria's shoulders rose with a harsh inhale. Her confidence was gone, replaced by something raw and furious. She looked around the table, searching for someone to stand with her, to say this was unfair, illegal, impossible. But the faces around her were lit by their screens, blue and red, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. They weren't loyal. They were calculating exits. Ava leaned forward for the first time, just an inch. The movement drew attention because it broke her stillness like a single drop of ink in clear water. Her voice stayed quiet. "You wanted clarity," she said. "Now you have it." Victoria's expression twisted, anger fighting fear. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she spat, louder than before, loud enough for microphones to catch every syllable. Ava didn't flinch. She met Victoria's eyes like she was reading a line already printed. "Yes," Ava said, calm as a signature. "I made a choice." The room held on that word, choice. It sounded like a foreign concept at this table, something that didn't belong to the person who had been mocked minutes earlier. Another refresh hit the monitors. The red line dipped again, and somewhere beyond the glass walls, the city kept shining unaware, indifferent while inside. An empire began to come apart in clean, documented pieces. The boardroom had become a swarm trapped inside glass. People spoke over one another in clipped bursts, each voice trying to climb above the others without sounding desperate. The professionalism didn't disappear. It warped. It turned into a frantic performance of control, as if the right corporate words could still stitch the damage back together. An executive stabbed at his screen with shaking fingers. "The feed is already spreading," he said. half to himself, half to the room. His eyes flicked to the livestream monitor, where the delay was only a few seconds. Their own panic stared back at them, a mirror with an audience. "Call compliance," someone demanded. "We need a halt," another voice snapped. "Trading halt." A third voice rose, sharper, angry at the chaos itself. "You don't just pull 2.4 billion out of thin air." The CFO's phone kept buzzing like a warning siren. He had stopped trying to silence it. He scrolled through alerts with the numb focus of someone reading a medical chart. When he looked up, his face held the beginning of resignation. "They're asking for confirmation in writing," he said. "Banks, partners, everyone." Victoria tried to seize the room back with volume. "Enough," she barked. The command cut through the noise for a moment, forcing heads to turn toward her. She stood rigid at the head of the table, shoulders squared, jaw locked. Her authority still existed in theory, but it no longer controlled the air. She pointed at the conference phone as if it had failed her personally. "Get our counsel," she said. "Now, I want Monroe Capital on the line." A junior assistant, hands trembling, tapped at the conference console. The speaker emitted a flat tone, then a ring. Once, twice, then a dead click. The assistant's eyes widened in embarrassment, and he tried again. Another ring, another click. The room made a sound like a collective swallow. Victoria's gaze snapped toward Ava, hard and furious. "Fix this," she said, and the words came out like an order she still believed would work. "We can renegotiate. We can correct whatever misunderstanding you've created." Ava's eyes stayed on Victoria, calm and clear. She did not reach for her folder. She did not consult notes. Her stillness made the others look frantic by comparison, as if she were the only person in the room whose heartbeat had not changed. "There's nothing to renegotiate," Ava said quietly. Victoria's laugh was short and brittle. "You're enjoying this," she said, and the accusation sounded like a defense. "You think you can humiliate me and walk away." Ava didn't answer the emotion. She answered the reality. "This isn't humiliation," she said. "It's consequence." Victoria's mouth tightened. Her eyes darted around the table, searching for support. "You're all just going to sit there," she snapped at the board members. "She's destroying everything we've built." For a beat, no one spoke. The room hesitated, caught between the old gravity of Victoria's power and the new gravity of collapsing numbers. An executive near the middle of the table shifted in his chair, face lit by his phone screen. He looked down, then up, then down again, as if eye contact had become dangerous. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost respectful, and it landed harder than shouting. "No, ma'am," he said. "You did." The sentence didn't carry drama. It carried finality. Victoria stared at him as if he had betrayed her with a knife. The flush returned to her cheeks, then drained again. Her hand went to the edge of the table, gripping it like a railing. The polished surface reflected her fingers, tense and white, and the reflection made her look like she was holding on to two ledges at once. Behind her, the monitors refreshed. The red line dipped again. Someone made a choking sound, halfway between a cough and a curse. The candlestick chart on the side screen extended downward, one red bar after another, turning the fall into something you could measure, replay, share. A phone speaker blared suddenly from someone's desk, a pre-recorded voicemail message. The tone was cheerful, absurd against the panic. The executive stabbed at the screen to stop it, face burning. The room's humiliation kept multiplying, not from insults now, but from exposure. Victoria pivoted back to Ava, voice lowering, trying a different weapon. If command wasn't working, she reached for pressure. "Do you understand what this will do to you?" she said, and her tone carried the threat of reputational ruin. "No one will trust you. You think people want to partner with someone who pulls funding like a tantrum." Ava's gaze didn't flicker. "People trust contracts," she said, "not tantrums." Victoria's lips parted, then pressed together. She looked briefly toward the corner camera, and the movement was involuntary, like a person checking a wound. The red light blinked back, steady and unjudging. The room's noise rose again. Someone was already drafting a statement, fingers flying on a laptop. Another executive spoke into his phone, voice tight, trying to soothe someone on the other end. "Yes, we're aware. Yes, we're handling it. No, we don't have. He stopped, listened, and his shoulders sagged. Ava's eyes tracked the chaos like weather. Her posture remained composed, but there was a quiet intensity in her face now, the focus of someone ensuring the right pieces were falling into place. Victoria tried one last time to bend the room back around her. Ava, she said, using her first name like a hook, as if familiarity could soften the situation into negotiation. Let's be practical. We can fix this. We can make this right. Ava rose. The movement sliced clean through the room's noise. Chairs stopped shifting. Voices faltered. Even the CFO paused mid-scroll. Ava stood with controlled ease, smoothing nothing, adjusting nothing because she didn't need to. She gathered her portfolio with one hand. The leather made a soft sound against the table, a muted whisper that felt louder than the shouting had. She looked at Victoria, then at the board, then briefly toward the camera that had captured every second of their unraveling. For future reference, Ava said, voice calm, words measured, respect is cheaper than recovery. Victoria's eyes widened, anger flaring again. Don't you walk out, she snapped. Ava didn't argue. She didn't rush. She simply turned toward the door. The live stream camera blinked, capturing her profile in the glass, steady and unshaken, while behind her the boardroom continued to fracture, executives scrambling, phones buzzing, numbers falling. Ava paused one step from the exit, as if listening to the room's last attempt to control her. Her shoulders stayed relaxed. Her spine stayed straight. Then her eyes flicked once toward the corner camera, the red light still pulsing, patient as truth. And she kept moving, leaving the chaos to echo in a room that suddenly felt too bright to hide anything. Ava's hand paused on the door handle, not because she hesitated, but because the room behind her changed tone. The noise shifted from frantic to sharp, from scrambling to bargaining. Victoria's voice rose again, crisp with desperation disguised as command. Stop, Victoria snapped. You don't get to make a spectacle and vanish. Ava turned back slowly. The portfolio hung at her side, weightless in her grip. Her face stayed composed, but her eyes sharpened, the way a lens tightens focus. I didn't make it a spectacle, Ava said. You live-streamed it. The sentence landed cleanly. A few executives froze mid-motion, as if the words had pinned them to their chairs. The blinking red camera light felt brighter now, not because it changed, but because everyone suddenly remembered it was still there. Victoria stepped around the table, heels tapping in quick, uneven beats. She gestured toward the monitors. This is misconduct, she said, voice tight. This is sabotage. This is... Ava lifted her portfolio and set it on the table with a controlled, quiet thud. Leather against lacquer. A small sound with the weight of a final clause. She opened it. No dramatic flourish, just a precise movement, like opening a file in court. Inside, a thin stack of documents sat neatly aligned. Ava slid one sheet out and placed it flat on the table, turning it so the board could see. Her fingertip pressed the paper's corner, holding it in place as if wind could steal it. Clause 8.3, she said. The words weren't an explanation. They were a label. Victoria's eyes narrowed. You keep saying that like it means... Ava raised her hand slightly, not as a stop sign, but as a calm request for silence. The room obeyed more readily than it had obeyed Victoria all day. The executives were no longer following authority. They were following certainty. Ava tapped the page once. The sound was crisp. She didn't read the whole clause aloud. She traced the line that mattered, the way a surgeon points to the incision. Her finger moved slowly across the text, then stopped. It allows immediate withdrawal, Ava said, voice even, if any act of misconduct is documented during negotiations. Victoria's lips parted, then tightened again. Her gaze flicked to the paper, unwilling to give it legitimacy, then flicked away as if looking too long might make it true. One of the executives leaned in, eyes scanning. The CFO's face hardened into understanding, and that understanding made him look older. Ava's eyes lifted to Victoria. And since this meeting is live-streamed, she said, then shifted her gaze toward the corner camera. You provided the documentation. The camera's red light blinked, steady, indifferent. The lens caught Ava's face, reflected in the glass wall behind her, calm within the chaos. Victoria's mouth opened. and for a second it looked like words would come. Nothing did. Her jaw worked as if she were trying to swallow the moment whole. Ava reached into her portfolio and drew out a phone. Not her own, but a device already unlocked and ready. She set it on the table between them. The screen glowed bright. An email chain filled the display, lines stacked neatly with timestamps and subject headers. The CFO leaned closer involuntarily. A few executives craned their necks. The room's attention collapsed onto the small rectangle of light. Ava angled the screen toward the camera as well, just enough. In the header, the time stood out in plain black text. 3:17 p.m. Below it, a line of confirmation. Executed. A single metallic click sounded as someone's pen slipped from nervous fingers and hit the table. It rolled for an inch and stopped. Ava didn't need to point again. The metadata spoke without emotion. Victoria stared at the phone screen. The flush returned to her cheeks, climbing fast, then drained as if someone had opened a valve. Her eyes flicked up to the camera and back down again, caught in a loop of realization and disbelief. "That's," she began, and the word cracked. Ava's voice stayed soft. "Signed by your legal team," she said. "Not mine." The CFO exhaled through his nose, a sound like surrender. He looked at Victoria, then quickly looked away, as if he didn't want his face on the live stream when the truth fully arrived. Victoria's hand lifted, hovering above the table as if she could swipe the phone away and erase the timestamp with her palm. She didn't touch it. Her fingers trembled slightly, and the tremor looked violent in the table's reflection. "You set me up," she said, and the accusation came out thin. Ava's eyes didn't soften. "You set yourself up," she replied. "You just thought the room was private." Victoria turned to the board, searching for rescue in their faces. She found only calculation and fear. People were already imagining subpoenas, inquiries, resignations. Their eyes had shifted from loyalty to liability. Ava slid the clause page a fraction closer to Victoria, not aggressively, just enough that it entered her space. The paper's edge made a faint whisper against the lacquer. That tiny sound felt louder than any shout. Victoria's voice rose suddenly, sharp and breaking. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Ava held her gaze. "Yes," she said. "I protected my capital from contamination." The word contamination tasted clinical. It made the situation feel less like revenge and more like risk management, which was worse. Revenge could be argued with. Risk management was procedure. A phone buzzed again, then another. The room had not been saved by the reveal. It had been sealed by it. Ava looked toward the camera once more. The red light blinked back, capturing the moment the boardroom realized this wasn't a debate. It was an executed clause, a documented act, and a timestamp that could not be negotiated. Victoria's shoulders sagged a fraction. The remote slipped slightly in her hand. She caught it clumsily, and the clumsy movement exposed how little control she had left. Ava closed her portfolio, the leather folding with a soft, final sound. She picked it up again, calm returning to her grip as if it had never left. "There's nothing to fix," Ava said, quieter now. "This isn't a negotiation." The room sat in the aftermath of that sentence, staring at the glowing timestamp like a verdict. And outside the glass, the city kept moving, unaware that a single clip, a single clause, and 3 numbers on an email header had just rewritten the fate of everything on the table. The boardroom didn't explode after the reveal. It deflated. The kind of collapse that happens when everyone realizes the argument is already over and the paperwork has simply arrived late to the funeral. The phones kept vibrating, but now the vibrations sounded less like alarms and more like confirmation. Every buzz was another door closing somewhere outside the glass, another call being returned with a colder voice on the other end, another partner shifting from concern to distance. Victoria stood very still, as if movement might make the situation irreversible, even though it already was. Her eyes stayed locked on the timestamp that had branded the afternoon. The edges of her confidence had frayed into something raw. "You can't walk away from this," she said, quieter now, trying to make the statement sound like a rule instead of a wish. "This affects everyone. Employees, shareholders, markets." She reached for the only lever she had left, the larger story, the moral frame, the idea that consequences could be negotiated if they hurt enough people. Ava didn't argue the stakes. She didn't need to. She looked at Victoria the way a person looks at a bridge that's already been condemned. Her tone stayed calm, factual, almost gentle. "Then you should have protected them," she said. Victoria's mouth tightened. She tried anger again, but it came out strained. "You'll be blamed," she said. "They'll paint you as reckless. They'll call it a stunt." Ava's eyes flicked toward the camera. The red light continued blinking. The room's earlier performance, the smirks, the laughter, the dismissal, those weren't rumors. They were stored, shared, replayed. "They can call it whatever they want," Ava said. "The footage won't change." An executive at the far end of the table muttered a curse under his breath and stood, then stopped, unsure where to go. The CFO spoke into his phone, voice low, trying to hold a line with someone who no longer cared to be held. "We're working on it," he said. "Yes, I understand. I'm telling you it's executed. No, we can't." He stopped, listening, and his shoulders dropped. "Understood," he finished, the same word Ava had used earlier, now stripped of dignity and turned into surrender. Victoria flinched at the sound. She spun toward the board, searching for a vote, a motion, a show of unity. "We can suspend this," she said. "Too fast. We can issue a correction. We can—" The man who had spoken up earlier kept his eyes down. Another executive avoided her gaze entirely, staring at the red bars on a chart as if they were more trustworthy than a chairwoman. A phone rang, an actual ring this time, loud and old-fashioned. The sound cut through the room like a blade. No one answered at first. Then an executive grabbed it, pressed it to his ear, and went pale. He didn't speak to the room. His face did it for him. He lowered the phone slowly, as if it were heavy. "They're calling in guarantees," he said. The sentence moved across the table like a cold wind. Someone's hand went to their mouth. Another executive sank back into his chair, eyes unfocused, as if he had just watched the future collapse in real time. Victoria's breathing changed. It grew audible, shallow, sharp. She gripped the table edge again, but now it looked less like command and more like someone steadying themselves before falling. "You're making a mistake," she said, and the words came out smaller than she intended. "This will destroy us." Ava's expression didn't harden. It didn't soften either. It stayed controlled, like a door that only opens for the right key. "You already chose destruction," Ava replied. "You just thought it would be mine." Victoria's eyes flashed, and for a second she reached for her old weapon, humiliation, because it was familiar. She lifted her chin, forced a smile that didn't quite form. "You think you're above this," she said. "You think you can teach me a lesson?" Ava's gaze stayed on her. The calm in her face made Victoria's sarcasm look frantic. "I don't need to teach you anything," Ava said. "Your system is doing it." The room absorbed that. It wasn't a taunt, it was diagnosis. Victoria's jaw clenched. She looked toward the camera again, this time with something like fear. The lens had become a witness she couldn't intimidate. "Turn it off," she said, voice rising. "Turn it off now." One of the executives hesitated, hand hovering toward the controls, then stopped. Turning it off wouldn't erase the beginning. It would only add a final, ugly admission to the clip. Panic. Victoria saw the hesitation and snapped. "Do it." No one moved. For a heartbeat, her authority had nowhere to land. The order hung in the air, unclaimed, and that emptiness exposed her more than the falling stock ever could. Ava picked up her portfolio again. The leather made a soft, closing sound as her fingers tightened around the handle. She didn't rush. She didn't linger. The balance was deliberate. Victoria's voice broke through, sharper, desperate. "You can't just leave. This is my company." Ava looked at her steadily. "It's not your company," she said, and the words cut clean because they weren't shouted. "It's an agreement, and agreements have conditions." Victoria took a step forward, then stopped, as if something invisible held her back. The table between them felt wider now, filled with numbers and proof and the weight of a sentence that could not be unsaid. Ava turned toward the door. Her reflection traveled along the glass wall beside her, calm and composed, while behind her the room continued to unravel, calls escalating, alerts multiplying, voices trying to sound steady and failing. As she reached the exit, Victoria's last attempt came out quieter, almost pleading, stripped of theater. "Wait," she said. Ava paused, just long enough for the pause to be felt, then looked back. Victoria's eyes searched Ava's face for mercy the way she had searched earlier for laughter. She found neither. Ava's voice stayed low, even, and final. "There's nothing left to negotiate," she said. "Only what happens next." Then she stepped out of the boardroom, leaving Victoria with a camera that never blinked, a room full of witnesses, and a collapse that was no longer private enough to hide. The hallway outside the boardroom felt wider than it had a few minutes ago, as if the building itself had stepped back to let consequences pass. Ava walked without hurry. The carpet muted her footsteps, but the faint vibration of her phone in her hand made a small, steady pulse against her skin. Not panic, confirmation. Behind the glass door, the voices rose and fell in distorted waves, softened by distance and insulation. The sound was no longer a performance for her. It was weather. It belonged to the room that had chosen it. As Ava moved toward the elevators, the city pressed against the windows in clean lines of light. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleanser and cold metal. A single elevator chime rang down the corridor, bright and indifferent. Her phone vibrated again. She glanced down once, just long enough to see a headline fragment begin to form in the notification preview. She didn't open it. She didn't need the full sentence. The world outside would assemble the story on its own. When the elevator doors slid open, the interior mirrored her reflection back in brushed steel. Her face looked calm there, almost detached, as if the building's polished surfaces had decided to imitate her. She stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. The panel lit up with a soft beep. The doors closed with a quiet hiss. For a moment, the only sound was the elevator's low hum, steady and mechanical. Ava's breathing stayed even. Her grip on the portfolio remained relaxed, the leather cool against her fingers. As the elevator descended, another vibration arrived. Then another. The frequency increased, not in a frantic rhythm, but in a rhythm that suggested a system waking up. Calls being returned. Agreements reevaluated. People who had smiled earlier now speaking into phones with tight, careful voices. By the time the doors opened onto the lobby, the building felt different. Not louder, just more alert. The marble floor reflected movement guards shifting their stance. Assistants walking faster, eyes lifting from screens more often. The air carried the faint scent of coffee again, but now it was mixed with something sharper, like overheated electronics. Ava crossed the lobby and stepped outside. Cold air met her immediately, clean and real. Traffic hissed along the street below, tires on wet pavement making a constant, indifferent rush. Above it all, the tower's glass face held the sky like a mirror that refused to blink. Ava walked to the curb and paused, letting a black car glide to a stop in front of her. The driver opened the door, wordless. She slid in, setting her portfolio beside her. The door closed with a soft, final thump, sealing her into quiet. The car pulled away from the curb. On a screen mounted behind the front seats, a news channel played silently. A breaking banner crawled across the bottom in bold text. Ava didn't lean forward. She didn't need audio to understand the shape of what was happening. The anchor's mouth moved too quickly, eyes bright with the thrill of a collapse that could be explained in a headline. The tower appeared again in the window as the car turned. Glass and steel rising into the night, flawless from the outside. Ava watched it for a moment, then let her gaze drift back to the city. Hours later, the story spread the way stories spread now, fast, clipped, hungry. The clip from the boardroom traveled through feeds, reposted with captions, slowed down, zoomed in, dissected. The raised palm, the smirk, the laughter. The moment the phones started buzzing. The timestamp on the email header. The red line dropping on the chart. By evening, the market had given the fall a number, 38%. The figure appeared beside the company's name as if it had always belonged there. By midnight, Victoria Sloane's face looped on screens everywhere, caught between anger and disbelief, the exact instant before control left her hands for good. Commentators called it a collapse, a lesson, a scandal. Analysts turned it into a case study. People who had never sat in a boardroom watched the clip and understood the feeling anyway. Ava did not appear on any panel. She did not take a victory lap. She did not offer a quote that could be twisted into something else. She allowed the footage to speak because it was cleaner than speech. A single statement was issued from Monroe Capital the next morning, plain and brief, black text on white background. Partnerships end when respect does. No embellishment, no apology, no explanation. Days passed. The name of the incident hardened into a phrase, the handshake collapse. It showed up in articles, in market reports, in memos. Executives referenced it in meetings with a caution in their voice, as if saying it too loudly might summon it. In quiet offices and smaller conference rooms, women replayed the clip on their phones with the sound low. Some watched the raised palm again and again, then watched Ava's stillness, then watched the red line on the chart. They didn't share it for entertainment. They shared it like a warning label. Ava sat in her own office later that week, windows open to morning light. The city sounded different in daylight, softer, more ordinary. A legal pad lay on her desk beside a closed folder. She picked up her pen, wrote a short note, then capped it and set it down. Her phone buzzed once. She ignored it. The power in her room wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It lived in choices made quietly, in conditions enforced without theatrics, in the simple fact that dignity had a price and she refused to pay it in silence. Power doesn't roar. It stops shaking hands.